Chapter 1. A Sickness in the Head. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. A Sickness in the Head. Translator. Leg Editor. Leg. In the chaotic darkness, the young Ren Xiaosu awoke and started wiping off the sweat on his forehead. Then he looked towards the boy of around 14 who was standing at the door. Lu Yuan, did anything happen? Ren Xiaosu asked. Addressed as Lu Yuan, the boy's full name was Yen Lu Yuan. From his appearance, Yen Lu Yuan looked like a very harmless and innocent person. However, he was holding a bone knife in his hands and standing guard at the door. It was deep into the night at the moment, but he did not close his eyes even though he looked very sleepy, as he had to keep watch through the night. Yen Lu Yuan shook his head and said, "No, everything is fine." What exactly is this sickness you're experiencing in your head? Even the town's doctor can't diagnose what's wrong with you. You don't have to worry about such things. What I'm experiencing is not a sickness. Ren Xiaosu said firmly, it'll be dawn soon, and I'll be going out to hunt. You should sleep for a while so that you can get up in time for school. Okay. Yen Lu Yuan nodded, glum. But what's the point of studying in a wasteland like this? It will be useful for you in the future, Ren Xiaosu said in an irrefutable tone. I want to go out to hunt too. Yen Lu Yuan pouted. Who's going to keep watch at night if something happens to you? Me, who's unconscious. Ren Xiaosu stood up and prepared to go fetch water from the town center as it was less dangerous to do so after dawn broke. During the night, it was a lawless land out there. Dark clouds were building up without rest in the cloudy sky. A drop of acid rain eventually fell from above. It got blown about by the strong winds and finally landed in front of Ren Xiaosu. Ren Xiaosu was lying on the ground in the wilderness. He frowned and felt that he was a little unlucky today as the acid rain arrived before his prey appeared. Someone mentioned that he must be careful of the beasts while moving around in this wasteland. But Ren Xiaosu felt that the person left everything else unspoken, because many things could still kill a person out in this wasteland. One of them was the acid rain. However, Ren Xiaosu still did not make a move. If he couldn't catch some game today, he and Yen Lu Yuan would starve to death before they could die from the disease caused by the acid rain. Ren Xiaosu's eyes popped when he heard a bird's wings flapping. However, the rhythm of his breathing did not change. Ren Xiaosu had used a tree branch to prop up a black cauldron and scattered some black bread crumbs underneath it a short distance ahead of himself. That large bird landed beside the cauldron and looked around sharply with an alert gaze. The size of the bird was not that much smaller than the cauldron, in fact. As it stood in the same spot preening its feathers, Ren Xiaosu did not make a move and continued waiting. The bird finally seemed to let its guard down as it started sneaking towards the cauldron as a thief would. However, when it entered into the boundary under the cauldron and was about to lower its head to peck on the bread crumbs, Ren Xiaosu pulled hard on the rope in his hand. Right after, the young man jumped up and rushed towards the cauldron like an unbridled wild donkey. Before the large bird could flip the cauldron over, he mustered all of his strength and used his body to pin down the cauldron. Phew! Ren Xiaosu heaved a sigh of relief as he had waited an entire night just to catch this sparrow. Fortunately, his efforts had not gone to waste today, especially since such good opportunities were hard to come by. Clattering came from inside the cauldron as the struggling sparrow battered its tough wings against it. At this moment, the short melody of the clock striking the hour rang from the refugee stronghold. Ren Xiaosu turned around and looked at the town. He wondered when he could finally bring Yen Lu Yuan to live inside the stronghold. To Ren Xiaosu, the people living in the stronghold were fortunate because they did not have to face the dangers of the wastelands. However, not just anyone could enter that place as they wished. Right at this moment, the activity in the cauldron quieted by a lot. He let out a sigh and checked if the ragged cloth was wrapped firmly around his hand. Then Ren Xiaosu slowly lifted the cauldron up to create a tiny opening and put his hand in. He attempted to grab hold of the large sparrow by its legs. However, life was not always that smooth sailing. Ren Xiaosu yelped right after putting his hand under the cauldron. Ren Xiaosu pulled out his hand and had a look at his palm. The web between his thumb and forefinger was bleeding, as not even the ragged cloth could protect it against the sparrow's sharp beak. Ren Xiaosu got angry. He removed his ragged jacket and wrapped it around his hand. Then he thrust his hand under the cauldron again and grabbed the sparrow by its neck this time. He took the sparrow out from under the cauldron and tucked it in his arm. With a strong twist of his hand, the sparrow's neck broke and it went limp. At this moment, Ren Xiaosu felt a pinch in his heart because the large sparrow's claws had punched several holes into his jacket. Suddenly, his mind went blank, and Ren Xiaosu fell to his knees. It was as if a massive copper bell had been struck inside his head. Then he descended into a chaotic darkness. Oh no! In the past, this sickness only occurred at midnight, but now it came earlier. This was not the first time his sickness had acted up. Almost all the people in town knew there was something wrong with his head, and his pain would flare up at random times. Only Ren Xiaosu knew that it was not pain but a state of confusion that he was experiencing. Wait a minute. This time, it was different from the past. The black mist in his mind had dispersed and revealed a palace beyond it. Ren Xiaosu's eyes flew open, and he stood up. He looked at himself in disbelief. I came to this quickly. He originally had a chance to get a closer look at the palace's appearance, but he knew better. There was no difference between remaining unconscious and dying out here in the wilderness. Right now, he had to rush back to the town that was situated outside of Stronghold 113 before the heavens opened up with the acid rain. Ren Xiaosu tied the sparrow's legs together and slung it over his shoulder. Then he lifted the big cauldron and inverted it onto his head before running away. Pitter-patter, raindrops started falling on the cauldron. The cauldron had turned into his umbrella. Before he could run far, however, the silhouette of a person holding a bone knife stood in his way. Give your catch to me, but before the person could finish his sentence, he saw a big cauldron swinging in closer and closer, until it smacked into his face. Damn! The robber fell backwards. He had not expected Ren Xiaosu's attack to be that swift. And it was so forceful too. Then he saw Ren Xiaosu lower the pot before swinging it back up and placing it over his head to use as an umbrella, all in a single, continuous motion. The robber had not even fallen to the ground, yet Ren Xiaosu was already running off into the distance. The robber laid on the ground facing the sky as the acid rain came down. It was a little painful and stung his face. There was something about this that he could not understand. In most situations, shouldn't there be some interaction between them? Just how many times had this young man encountered a similar situation to react so instinctively? Something was not right. He could hear that young man's footsteps approaching again. The robber hurriedly sat up and turned around to look. He discovered that the young man was coming back to him. Ren Xiaosu had not planned to return, but he distinctly heard a voice reverberate from the palace in his mind, Quest. Gift your catch to someone else. Who said that? Ren Xiaosu turned around and walked back to the robber with some uncertainty. The robber said in panic, let's talk this over. Hey, that's not right, I'm the victim here. Ren Xiaosu sized up the robber. He noticed that there were no others nearby. You want this sparrow? Ren Xiaosu asked. The robber's eyes lit up. I do. Here, take it. Ren Xiaosu stuffed the sparrow into the man's arms without explaining himself. That unfamiliar yet neutral voice intoned again, quest complete. Awarded. Basic skill duplication scroll. You may use it to learn another person's skills. Ren Xiaosu was stunned, because he could feel a leather parchment appear within his mind. A skill duplication scroll that he could use to copy another's skills. Like hunting, survival, or some other skill. The robber hugged the large sparrow tightly in his arms and began to express his gratitude. "You're a good person." Before he could finish speaking, he saw Ren Xiaosu grab the sparrow back before leaving again. The robber was confused. He stared at Ren Xiaosu's receding figure as he scurried away. The fuck is this guy? What is he after? Chapter 2. This world has never trusted tears. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. This world has never trusted tears. Translator. Leg editor. Ren Xiaosu returned later than usual because of the robbery and his sudden loss of consciousness. Since he saw the sky darkening, he knew that it would be extremely dangerous to pass through the town with his catch at this time. During the day, people from the stronghold still came out to maintain order. But at night, those people would return back to the stronghold. Of course, the people from the stronghold were not doing this with good intentions. They were only worried that if the town got too chaotic, it would affect the manual labor that the refugees were performing. Oh, looks like Ren Xiaosu got quite the harvest today. When Ren Xiaosu ran back into town carrying the cauldron, someone with a dirty face greeted him. It was as though he had not washed his face ever since the day he was born. Most of the people in town looked like that. On most days, they went to the nearby coal mine to work in exchange for some food. The coal they mined would be delivered into the stronghold, and in turn, the workers would receive just enough black bread or potatoes to survive on. It wasn't only the mining of coal. All the necessary dirty work the stronghold needed to be done would be performed by the refugees. Since the well water in town was rationed, the amount that everyone got per day was fixed, and no one dared to even think of asking for more. Besides, barely any clean water sources existed nearby. Or rather, any clean water source was too dangerous to go to since feral beasts would gather there to drink. Hence everyone in town would always look so dirty that no one could see their faces clearly. Ren Xiaosu was no exception either. However, Ren Xiaosu had never worked in the coal mine before. He had his own way of surviving. Ren Xiaosu did not respond to anyone who greeted him. He just wanted to get back to his shack as quickly as possible. As Ren Xiaosu took an alternate way into town, he could see the towering stronghold walls from a short distance away. It felt very oppressive, for he could not even see the top when he looked up. Not many stone structures could be found in town as most people only stayed in shacks. Ren Xiaosu had started out quite relaxed. But he went on guard the moment he entered town and even drew the bone knife from his waist. The atmosphere on the street grew tense as though some kind of danger lurked within the shacks. But with Ren Xiaosu holding a bone knife in his hand, the people with threatening intentions restrained themselves. The first thing Ren Xiaosu learned while staying here was not to trust anyone. Other than Yan Luyuan. Whispers came from the shack next to the road. Ren Xiaosu has caught more game meat. How does that count as game? It's only a sparrow. But it's different from the sparrow that we saw in the ancient textbooks. I reckon that the eagles from before the cataclysm were also around this size. Don't provoke him. A voice ended the whispering from inside the shack. Someone seemed to know about Ren Xiaosu's past. Ren Xiaosu lifted the curtain door to his shack. The warmth in it made him less tense. When Yan Luyuan, who was sitting in the shack and doing his homework, saw Ren Xiaosu return, he looked pleasantly surprised. You caught a sparrow. Why didn't you light the kerosene lamp? Ren Xiaosu asked while frowning. Yan Luyuan was usually a wayward child, but in front of Ren Xiaosu, who was like his elder brother, he became surprisingly docile. I wanted to save some fuel for us. What if you become nearsighted? Ren Xiaosu put the sparrow down. Yan Liuyuan's eyes lit up. The schoolteacher mentioned something called spectacles that existed before the cataclysm but can only be found in the stronghold now. If we have something like that, we won't have to worry about being nearsighted anymore. Ren Xiaosu treated the statement with disdain. I've seen someone wearing the thing that you mentioned before. But to have your vision depend on something that could be dropped at any time out here in the wilderness, that's as good as death. Don't listen to your teacher's nonsense. Not everything he says is right. Oh. Yen Luyuan nodded and said, then why do you still insist on sending me to school? Ren Xiaosu choked on his words. Why do you keep blabbering? When can I go hunting with you? Yen Luyuan continued to ask. You're only 14. Why would you want to go hunting? If you do well in school, you won't have to go hunting. Ren Xiaosu said, isn't it much better to learn accounting, physics, or chemistry rather than hunting? Aren't you only 17? Yen Luyuan was unconvinced. In this era, even savages recognized the importance of knowledge. This was also why a teacher could survive in town. Whatever trouble happened in town, a teacher would always be the safest person since no one would target them. However, tuition was expensive. Otherwise, Ren Xiaosu would have gone to attend classes himself as well. Ren Xiaosu propped up the cauldron and skillfully dissected the sparrow at the same time. What did the teacher talk about today? I can only let you eat the sparrow's offal. I have to sell off the rest of it at the market tomorrow. Did you get injured? Yen Luyuan frowned when he saw the wound on Ren Xiaosu's hand. It had been pecked by the sparrow, and the wound was still bleeding. The big cauldron was hung on a rod, and the flicking fire in the shack's fire pit illuminated Ren Xiaosu's face every now and again. It's just a scratch. It fell silent in the shack. After a while, Ren Xiaosu ladled out the cooked organs of the sparrow from the pot and handed them to Yen Luyuan. Eat up. Yen Liuyuan's eyes suddenly reddened. I don't want it. You should have it instead since you need to heal your wound. I'll just have some soup. Ren Xiaosu said, I still have some black bread that I can eat. I'm not eating. Your wound isn't a scratch at all. I saw someone in town die as a result of an infection a few days ago because we don't have access to any medicine for treating cuts and scrapes, Yen Luyuan stubbornly said as tears nearly rolled down his face. Pa! Ren Xiaosu suddenly slapped Yen Luyuan across the face and said, remember this, you and I can never cry as long as we are living in this world. This world doesn't trust tears. Ren Xiaosu continued, look at what kind of people are around us. What will happen to me if you don't eat well and someone rushes in and stabs me to death at night? I send you to school because I hope you won't become someone like me, who only knows how to hunt. You have a unique skill. As long as you study hard, you will not need to work all day in the wilderness like me to earn a living. The reason I send you to school is because I don't want you to become savages like them. Yen Luyuan suddenly took the sparrow offal from Ren Xiaosu and gobbled them down. He managed to hold back his tears in the end as he wanted to learn to be as strong as Ren Xiaosu. Ahem, come over and help me dress the wound with a clean cloth after you've eaten, Ren Xiaosu said. Okay, Yen Luyuan responded. You're normally full of mischief when we're outside, so why do you behave like such a doormat whenever we're home? Ren Xiaosu sighed. Did anything happen in town today? Oh yes. Yen Luyuan said as he looked for a clean cloth. A group of people came out of the stronghold saying that they were looking for a guide to lead them to Stronghold 112. They want to head there by going straight through the Jing Mountains. They want to go to Stronghold 112. Ren Xiaosu was stunned for a moment before frowning. They're even insisting on getting there via the Jing Mountains. Do you think they'll come looking for you? Everyone in town knows that you're familiar with the lands outside. Yen Luyuan blinked and said, I heard that they're musicians and singers of a band in Stronghold 113 who have been invited to perform at Stronghold 112. I've never seen a singer before though. I'm not going. Ren Xiaosu shook his head and said, let those people go via the Jing Mountains if they want. I want you to stay away from them. There's something strange about those people. At this moment, Ren Xiaosu had conflicted feelings. In a world like this, there were still professional singers and musicians in bands. What on earth was it like inside the stronghold? Ren Xiaosu was suddenly looking forward to finding out. Chapter 3. A Palace. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. A Palace. Translator. Leg Editor. Ren Xiaosu had already fallen asleep. After waiting out in the wilderness for such a long time, all he managed to catch was one sparrow. Although he spent a majority of the time lying on the ground and keeping still, anyone with experience would know that staying alert in such a position was actually very tiring. Before sleeping, he instructed Yan Luyuan again, "Stay away from those people if you see them. It can't be that they don't know how dangerous the Jing Mountains are. Most people would choose to avoid passing through there, yet they insist on taking that route. My instincts tell me that this isn't a simple matter." "Okay." Yan Luyuan nodded obediently. "Got it." As a matter of fact, Ren Xiaosu and Yan Luyuan were quite the odd team. A few years ago, they did not know each other at all. Later on, Ren Xiaosu decided to protect the young Yan Luyuan as he unintentionally discovered Yan Liuyuan's secret. On top of that, his headache had been troubling him for a very long time, so he needed someone to keep watch for him at night. Back then, Ren Xiaosu told Yan Luyuan in no uncertain terms that they were only a team because of mutual benefit. But over the years, it soon became unclear whether their partnership had any feelings involved or if it was still for mutual benefit. Yan Luyuan had always been a very clever person when outside. He only behaved like an obedient lamb in front of Ren Xiaosu. Sometimes, Yan Luyuan would say that he was only alive because Ren Xiaosu had risked his own life to save him. However, Ren Xiaosu had never acknowledged it. At present, Ren Xiaosu only wanted to find out what kinds of changes his mind had gone through. He waited a very long time tonight as he wanted to see if this sickness that had been troubling him would recur. In the end, that chaotic confusion did not set in. It seemed like the palace had always stayed hidden when he was in a confused state. But now, that black mist of confusion finally dispersed. Ren Xiaosu wanted to see exactly what was inside the palace. When Yan Luyuan saw Ren Xiaosu lie down next to him, he silently picked up the bone knife and sat at the entrance of the shack where the curtain door was. As it was almost fall, it felt a little cold. At this moment, the rain stopped. Footsteps came from outside the shack's curtain door. The shoes that were stepping on the muddy road after the rain made a unique slippery sound. Someone lifted a corner of the curtain door. However, before the visitor could lift the curtain door aside, Yan Liuyuan's bone knife was pressed against the person's neck. It was a pretty face, a beautiful woman stood outside. Yan Luyuan frowned when he saw the woman. It was not a stranger. She lived nearby. The woman smiled. "Luyuan, you're still awake. Where is Xiaosu? I heard that he got back." "He's already asleep, big sister Xiaoyu." Yan Luyuan smiled. "If you have anything to say, just tell me." Xiaoyu's face looked a little unnatural. Did he get hurt when he went out this time? His hand was nipped by a sparrow. "But big sister Xiaoyu, you don't have to be so concerned about my brother, do you? After all, you're 8 years older than him." After Ren Xiaosu had fallen asleep, Yan Luyuan adopted a maturity beyond his years when dealing with outsiders. No matter whether he knew the person or whatever they might say, he didn't move the bone knife away from her neck. Xiaoyu took out a cigarette and lighter from her bag that she carried around. It was a rolled cigarette that was only distributed at the coal mines, power plants, and other properties under the control of the stronghold. A lot of the able-bodied laborers went there to work not only for the money and food, but also for the cigarettes. They would receive a cigarette for each day of work they put in. As such, at night after work, a large group of people could be regularly seen gathering together and smoking. Ren Xiaosu once explained to Yan Luyuan that the cigarettes were likely mixed with something highly addictive. However, it was obvious that Xiaoyu did not get her cigarette from working at those places. Xiaoyu lit the cigarette and took 2 puffs from it. She seemed to be thinking of something. You cheeky imp, I consider you two my little brothers. Oh. Yen Luyuan suddenly asked, did you catch a cold? Xiao Yu was stunned. Yes, does my voice sound a little hoarse? No, Yen Luyuan shook his head and laughed. I saw that the smoke was not coming out from one of your nostrils after you took a puff. Xiao Yu was speechless. For some reason, Xiao Yu felt that Yen Luyuan did not like her very much. Then I'll head back first. Xiao Yu said, when your brother wakes up, tell him that I came over. Okay. Yen Luyuan smiled. I'll pass the message along. After Xiao Yu left, Ren Xiaosu suddenly spoke from behind Yen Luyuan. Don't bully big sister Xiao Yu in the future. It's not easy for her either. Bro, she's not decent. Yen Luyuan said, besides, she's only sticking close to you because she knows you always succeed when hunting. Who's decent around here? Ren Xiaosu said calmly, no decent person can survive in this world. Everyone's hand is forced by their living conditions. We can only distance ourselves from her. Don't make fun of her. A chaste woman who was too decent would not be able to survive in this town. Ren Xiaosu thought for a while and said, she didn't even mention that she likes me. Besides, are you sure that she's only getting close to me because I'm successful at hunting? And not because I'm handsome. Bro, everyone has not washed their faces for months. Everyone here looks basically the same. Yen Luyuan was speechless as he looked at Ren Xiaosu. Bro, didn't you fall asleep? Why are you still awake? I was just thinking, Ren Xiaosu said as a brief explanation. Ren Xiaosu was not asleep because he had been exploring the secrets of the palace in his mind. In the circular palace, the walls were lined with old wooden cabinets, making it look like a huge showroom of sorts. However, he could not see what was on the display cabinets in the showroom as they were covered in black mist. In the middle of the room, there was only one table with a brass typewriter on top of it. It was an obsolete typewriter that would make loud clacking sounds when typed on and hadn't existed for a very long time since the cataclysm. There were only 24 brass keys on this typewriter. Each of them was engraved with a character. Fair, positive, honest, real, friendly, kind, rich, strong, etc. It was full of positive energy, in a manner of speaking. But it seemed that the typewriter was supplied with an unlimited amount of leather parchment and would move by itself without anyone typing on the brass keys. Currently on it were two small lines of words that had appeared during the afternoon. Quest. Gift your catch to someone else. Quest complete. Awarded basic skill duplication scroll. You may use it to learn another person's skills. He could not tell if he was imagining this or if there was some other explanation for it. According to legend, some people could create a memory palace and build a fantasy world based on the level of their spiritual will. But Ren Xiaosu felt that his palace looked a little different from the description of a memory palace. Why would it get him to gift his catch to someone else? Did this typewriter want him to be a good person? To be a good person in a world where ethics came at a premium? No way in hell. At this moment, his consciousness was standing in the center of the vast palace as he looked at the display cabinets around him. It looked like items were floating within the display cabinets, but they were hidden by the darkness. That black mist didn't allow Ren Xiaosu to see what was floating inside. These display cabinets were connected to the dome of the palace, making it look like a huge museum. Ren Xiaosu walked up to one of the cabinets and tried touching the item floating in the black mist. But no matter how hard he tried, he could not penetrate the resistance of the black mist. It was a power that he could not pry into right now. If Ren Xiaosu wanted to know whether the palace was real, he would have to use actions to prove its existence. Chapter 4. Luck is a type of skill too. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Luck is a type of skill too. Translator. Leg editor. Leg, I might possess some kind of skill too, Ren Xiaosu said. Sitting at the entrance of the shack, Yan Luyuan was stunned as he lifted the curtain door to gaze at the starry sky after the rain. You mean? I'm still not sure. I have to try it out and see. Ren Xiaosu sat down beside Yan Luyuan. According to the legends in town, someone could pull a train out of thin air. I didn't believe it in the past, but after I met you, I thought that it might be a possibility. Now that I might also have a strange skill, this feels very weird to me. Yan Liuyuan's skill was luck. It was a very baffling skill to comprehend. When Yan Luyuan made a wish for Ren Xiaosu to return from a successful hunt, a sparrow would mysteriously drop at his feet even though he did not do anything while walking out in the wilderness. However, this skill had a side effect. Yan Luyuan would usually get a fever that would not subside or suffer some other minor illnesses or mishaps after he made a wish. This was why Ren Xiaosu wanted to protect Yan Luyuan at the beginning. At first, he did not believe it. But later, he had no choice but to accept this truth. Suddenly, a shooting star flashed across the sky. Yan Luyuan subconsciously put his hands together to make a wish. However, he was stopped by Ren Xiaosu. Don't you go making any wishes. Something is going to happen to you if you do. Nowadays, Ren Xiaosu rarely depended on Yan Liuyuan's luck as he was capable of hunting with great success. He did not need Yan Luyuan to cast his skill anymore, and Yan Luyuan wouldn't go against his wishes either. The skinny Yan Luyuan watched the shooting star vanished, lost in thought. Why do shooting stars come and go so quickly? What if people can't make a wish in time? Ren Xiaosu thought for a while and answered, they probably move so quickly because they don't actually want to listen to anyone's wishes. Yan Luyuan turned his head and gave Ren Xiaosu a blank stare. Yan Luyuan was Ren Xiaosu's night watchman, but it did not mean that he had to keep watch throughout the night. Ren Xiaosu would take turns with him. After all, Yan Luyuan still needed to attend school during the day. This was an excruciating situation, as not getting enough sleep was a huge problem. But to survive in such an environment, be it Ren Xiaosu or Yan Luyuan, they had no choice but to take these actions. In the early morning, Ren Xiaosu led Yan Luyuan outside. They took their valuables, including Ren Xiaosu's big cauldron, with them. It was expected for someone to rummage through their shack by the time they returned at night. I heard that the people living in the stronghold don't shut their doors at night because no one will steal their things. Yan Luyuan was carrying a bedroll on his back while he looked at Ren Xiaosu holding the cauldron he carried wherever he went. These were almost all of their belongings. Yan Luyuan would usually carry the bedroll with him whenever he went to school. It was almost the same situation with the other students as well. Everyone was accustomed to this. Bullshit. Although Ren Xiaosu looked forward to living in the stronghold, he refused to believe there was a place where people would leave their doors open at night. Some people have the mindset that even the farts of those who live in the stronghold smell good and that the air there is sweet. But you still shouldn't be carrying that cauldron on your back everywhere you go, Yan Luyuan said. What do you know? Ren Xiaosu explained, it wasn't easy for me to get my hands on this cauldron. I can cook meals and catch sparrows with it. If we lose it, how are we going to spend our days? Ren Xiaosu held the cauldron over his shoulder with one hand while clutching the large sparrow upside down in his other. Along the way, many people were looking at Ren Xiaosu with envious eyes. It was important to realize that humans were no longer at the top of the food chain. There were rumors that the sparrows of the past were smaller than the size of a palm. But these days, even a bird like that could kill people by pecking them. Not everyone could catch a sparrow or had the patience to lie in wait in the wilderness for an entire day to catch one. They all hadn't seen meat and fish dishes in a long time, so it would be a lie if they were not envious of Ren Xiaosu. Ren Xiaosu led Yan Luyuan to the stronghold city gate. The towering walls made them feel minuscule and oppressed. Once they reached this place, there were noticeable changes in the architecture, and they could even see brick houses. As they approached the stronghold, the place began to look cleaner, tidier, and wealthier. The people living here were likely related to the people living in the stronghold. Perhaps they were good at flattery or had relatives living inside. But no matter what, these refugees were all known as contaminated and were not allowed inside the stronghold. Ren Xiaosu walked into a shop with a grocery store sign above the entrance. All sorts of items, such as cigarettes, matchsticks, metalware, food, and clothing, were sold in here. But the prices were very expensive. The old man in the shop was over the moon when he saw Ren Xiaosu. That looks like a rather large sparrow. Ren Xiaosu threw the sparrow onto the glass counter. How much can I get for this? Oh my, don't be so rough. That's an expensive piece of glass you're throwing it onto, old Wang said, pained. He picked up the limp sparrow and put it onto the metallic scale beside him. 1.74 kilograms. Not bad, Xiaosu. At this moment, the claw-like fingers of old Wang's wrinkled hands instinctively started making some calculations on an abacus. The abacus beads were pushed around, ticking and tacking. The market rate today is 200 yuan per 500 grams, so I'll pay you 700 for this catch. Make it 900. Ren Xiaosu said firmly, it's almost winter, and there are fewer sparrows out there these days, so 900 yuan is the lowest I will sell it for. Old Wang was unhappy as he pushed his abacus in front of Ren Xiaosu and said, I'll be sending this sparrow into the stronghold for the aristocracy to eat. Although there's a lack of meat in the stronghold, there's still a fixed price for everything. We have to do it by the book. Right as old Wang finished speaking, he saw Ren Xiaosu take the sparrow back and get ready to leave the shop. He quickly yanked the sleeve of Ren Xiaosu's ragged jacket. Where are you going? I'm going to check the price at old Li's grocery store, Ren Xiaosu said. Old Wang's grasp tightened even further. Someone from the stronghold's management had specifically given notice that they would be coming out to collect exotic animals today. This news wasn't promulgated to him alone. Old Wang smiled, his wrinkles appearing. How much do you want to sell it for? Ren Xiaosu still wanted to leave. We'll talk again after I ask around. Old Wang smiled amiably. Then won't Lu Yuan be late for school? Alright, 900 yuan it is. What did you just say? Ren Xiaosu asked calmly. Then wouldn't Lu Yuan be late, the sentence before that. How much do you want to sell it for? 1200. Old Wang was confused a moment later. Old Wang was feeling the pinch as he counted the money. He wet his fingers with his saliva and counted the cash over and over again, afraid that he would get the amount wrong. The final transaction price was 1,198 yuan. Ren Xiaosu had also given some concessions of his own. A sparrow fetching 1,198 yuan was not the result of the inflated prices, nor was it because of the large size of the sparrow. More importantly, it was because the people in Stronghold 113 did not normally get the chance to eat such exotic animals. Things were precious because they were scarce. Old Wang would never make a bad business deal. When he resold this sparrow to a powerful customer, he would still be able to earn a small profit from it and even gain their favor. Old Wang stuffed a stash of loose change into Ren Xiaosu's hands unwillingly. Nobody knew what he was thinking when he lowered his voice and whispered, Xiaosu, the next time you catch a sparrow, don't kill it. Some aristocrats want them alive and will offer an even higher price to buy them in that state. Ren Xiaosu was taken aback. Why would they want a live sparrow? So that they can kill it themselves. No, Old Wang shook his head and said, you don't know, right? There are people who keep them as pets. Chapter 5. The School. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. The School Translator. Leg Editor. Leg as pets. They're not buying them to eat. Ren Xiaosu was puzzled. What a waste. All of the meat on this is great, envy, you won't understand the world that the rich live in. Old Wang laughed and said, I heard that rich people used to keep eagles as pets a few hundred years ago. But haven't the eagles gotten too big and dangerous now? So the next best thing is the sparrows. Just look at how menacing this sparrow looks. It's exactly what the rich like. Ren Xiaosu thought about it for a while. So while there were still a lot of people who didn't have enough to eat, some people had started keeping sparrows as pets. But I'll have to sell it for a higher price if they want it alive. Ren Xiaosu said, when this bird is still alive, it can even kill people if you aren't careful. It's too dangerous. All of a sudden, Ren Xiaosu thought that if the refugees outside the stronghold were contaminated, wouldn't the sparrows be contaminated as well? Or did the people in the stronghold only need these refugees to work for them? And the walls, did they naturally divide them into a hierarchy? You can only get rich by taking risks. Old Wang smiled and said, since you can wait an entire night hunting, you're no ordinary person. If you make an effort to catch a live sparrow, you can probably afford to stop working for the next 6 months. Besides, haven't you thought about making some money so that you can get a wife? Get a wife? My ass. Ren Xiaosu said petulantly. Old Wang purposely said in a mysterious tone, Old Li, who lives next door, has a daughter who's studying at the same school as your little brother, Lu Yuan. She's a really decent girl. Based on what you said, wouldn't it be better if I just sold this sparrow to Old Li directly? Would I still need your introduction then? Ren Xiaosu turned his head to Yen Luyuan and asked, is Old Li's daughter your classmate? Yes. Yen Luyuan nodded. She's quite big. Shoo, go play over there, Old Wang snapped. Pretend I didn't say anything since you're mistaking my kindness for ill intent. Seeing that he almost got caught between Ren Xiaosu and Yen Liuyuan's bantering, Old Wang decisively stopped them by changing the topic. Remember, the next time you catch a live sparrow, you must bring it to me. Sure. Ren Xiaosu nodded. Although catching it alive was dangerous, it was not impossible. He looked around the grocery store and asked, how much are you selling the cotton-padded jacket for? The jackets are new arrivals, and they cost 500 yuan apiece. You should know that I bought them for 490 yuan each. I'm not looking to profit from selling these cotton-padded jackets at all. Old Wang said, one less death is one life saved, after all. How kind of you, praised Ren Xiaosu nonchalantly. I'll buy one. Check and see what size Luyuan should wear. Bro, buy one for yourself too, Yen Luyuan quickly said. Don't interrupt when adults are talking. Ren Xiaosu frowned. I'm not cold. Money was a good thing. The organizations that controlled the strongholds issued money to ensure the distribution of goods and materials. Although it was convenient, without it, nothing could be done. The winter here was freezing, but he had to put some money aside in case of emergencies. As there was still over a month left until winter, Ren Xiaosu thought that it would not be too late to buy another cotton-padded jacket by then if he could catch another sparrow. More importantly, it was time for Yen Luyuan to pay for his monthly tuition. Ren Xiaosu glanced around the grocery store again, his gaze resting at the counter behind Old Wang. How much are you selling the antibiotics and anti-inflammatory drugs for? You want to buy medicine. Only then did Old Wang notice the blood-stained bandage wrapped around Ren Xiaosu's hand. You're injured. You really must buy some medicine then. If not, you could get an infection and die. I'm asking you how much it is. Ren Xiaosu said impatiently. 210 yuan each. Old Wang said, antibiotics must be taken for 3 days straight. I'll sell you 3 pills for 620 yuan and give you an application of iodopovidone for free. I only have 10 pills left in stock here. Ren Xiaosu thought for a while before saying, how about rounding it down? If by rounding down, you mean removing the zero, shut it, Old Wang snapped. Ren Xiaosu smacked his lips and reluctantly looked away. Forget it, I'm not buying them. Inflammation is uncommon during winter. He turned around and led Yan Luyuan to school. When they passed by the grain store, Ren Xiaosu went in and bought a long loaf of black bread. The black bread was mixed with something that would make their throats uncomfortable when swallowed. Yan Luyuan said as he chewed on the black bread, "Bro, why don't you also pay for the tuition and come to school since you want to attend classes so much? I still have to go out to hunt." Ren Xiaosu said, "About what old Wang said earlier, there are quite a few well-to-do girls in your school, right? You had better not fall in love at such an early age. I heard that people in the past used to get married when they were around 13 to 14 years old," Yan Luyuan retorted. Although he had never given such matters any thought before, he found it fun and enjoyable to bicker with Ren Xiaosu. Finding joy amid hardship was probably one of the greatest skills that humans had. Ren Xiaosu feigned a slap upside Yan Luyuan's head. "How can we compare what people did in the past? You're still young. The women you get into a relationship with now will end up becoming someone else's wife in the future." Ren Xiaosu marveled at the thought. A relationship with someone else's wife sounds quite exciting for some reason. "Bro, what are you talking about? Why can't I understand?" said Yan Luyuan while blinking. "Get lost. Stop acting innocent with me," Ren Xiaosu said peeved. The school was the cleanest and tidiest place in the entire town. It was also the only residence that had its own individual yard. Walking in from the outside, properly spaced crops grown in the yard could be seen. Scallions, garlic sprouts, potatoes, cabbages, and many others. Ren Xiaosu felt that a place like a school should have bamboo trees growing around it instead. But then again, with food not easily accessible these days, it was quite fortunate to have a place to grow these vegetables. As such, Ren Xiaosu's wish was for Yan Luyuan to become a teacher when he grew up. It was not because he had a lot of respect for teachers, but that he felt that being a teacher was safe. They also had the privilege of having their own yard to grow some vegetables in. Furthermore, no one would ever steal their crops. It was such a wonderful thing. Generally speaking, Ren Xiaosu's wishes had always been very simple. Yan Luyuan took his tuition money and went to class. Ren Xiaosu squatted on top of the wall and listened to what was being taught inside the classroom. As he could not afford to pay the tuition, he had to eavesdrop like this. The teacher would sometimes tell the students stories about how glorious human civilization was in the past. Frankly, however, the teacher had not witnessed such a time either. Whatever he was telling them now were details passed on by word of mouth, so the truth had probably been distorted already. Although it was not very reliable, Ren Xiaosu was still fascinated by it. At times, Ren Xiaosu would ask Yan Luyuan questions about information he didn't understand or hear. This greatly troubled Yan Luyuan because if he could not answer him, it would show that he did not pay attention during the lessons. Hence, whenever Ren Xiaosu was present to attend the lessons, Yan Luyuan would be exceptionally attentive during class. For some reason, Yan Luyuan had to admit that his brother looked rather charming when he was seriously learning. It was no wonder Xiaoyu would throw herself at him. The teacher was holding a book in the classroom as he stared with melancholic eyes at some of the sleeping students. Then he looked at Ren Xiaosu, who was on top of the wall outside the window. He said to Yan Luyuan, "When you get back today, tell your brother that he can come into the yard and listen to my lessons in the future." "All right." Yan Luyuan smiled happily. Chapter 6. Walls and Science. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Walls and Science. Translator. Leg Editor. There was only one teacher who gave classes at the school. His name was Zhang Jinglin. Most people felt that the teacher was wise and thought that he knew everything. However, Ren Xiaosu always had doubts since people specialized in different professions, which meant people were usually only good at certain things. So how could it be possible for Mr. Zhang to be omniscient? Ren Xiaosu had always been different from most other people as he liked to ponder questions that he came across. Later on, he found out from listening to Mr. Zhang's lessons that this was known as dialectical logic. Yan Luyuan was sometimes bewildered because Ren Xiaosu would often oppose Mr. Zhang Jinglin's views, yet he still kept coming back to attend classes whenever he had free time. During the afternoon class, Ren Xiaosu specially brought Yan Luyuan out to celebrate. It wasn't for any reason other than to celebrate the fact that he could start listening to the lessons from the yard in the future. Usually when he squatted on the walls, he was too distant from the classroom to clearly hear what was being taught. Zhang Jinglin used to like to keep the windows shut during class as he was afraid that any outside commotion would affect the students and distract them. But after he realized that Ren Xiaosu was eavesdropping from outside the class, he left a window open for him. And now, he might as well just let Ren Xiaosu into the yard. Living in this chaotic world, many of the students' parents sent their children to school not because they wanted them to gain knowledge, but so that they could easily get married in the future. This was especially true for the girls who attended school as they would often marry into good families. In this generation, it was impressive to be literate and to handle 3-digit calculations. Everyone was busy trying to survive, so who would care if you were cultured or not when food was short? Hence, most of the parents were sending their children to school not because they had any long-term plans for them. Even in this hamlet, there were poor and rich people. Wherever there were people, comparisons were unavoidable. Yan Luyuan saw Ren Xiaosu go into the grocery store to buy a filtered cigarette. Old Wan even proudly mentioned that his cigarettes did not have any additional substances and were very safe to smoke. A cigarette costs 20 yuan per stick, extremely expensive. Yan Luyuan asked with suspicion, "Bro, why are you buying a cigarette? Your teacher allowed me to listen to his lessons from the yard. Even if I don't have to pay tuition, I should still show my gratitude." Ren Xiaosu smiled and said, "I know that Mr. Zhang likes to smoke." Whenever someone treated Ren Xiaosu kindly, he would return the gesture. While everyone was out in the school's backyard eating lunch, the two of them took the opportunity to approach Zhang Jinglin. He was eating some stir-fried cabbage when Ren Xiaosu handed the cigarette to him with a grin. Zhang Jinglin did not reject it. However, he made Yan Luyuan stand a distance away from him. "It's not good for you to inhale cigarette smoke while you're still growing." Ren Xiaosu thanked him. "Thank you for letting me into the yard to attend your lessons, sir." Phew. Zhang Jinglin lit the cigarette with a match he used for preparing meals at home. Then he blew out a breathful of smoke, looking pleased. "Students who enjoy attending lessons like you are rare. You can attend the lessons if you like. In the future, you can stand at the door, but you're not allowed to enter the classroom." "That's great." Ren Xiaosu said, "Teacher, I have a question." "Speak." Perhaps due to the fact that Zhang Jinglin rarely had the chance to have a smoke, he didn't mind any questions that Ren Xiaosu had for him. "Teacher, you said before that humans had a lot of technology before the cataclysm happened. Since we humans were not wiped out, why didn't those technologies reappear?" Zhang Jinglin glanced at Ren Xiaosu. For a period of time after the cataclysm, humans did not keep track of how long they had been drifting along in anarchy. It was good enough to survive each day, so nobody bothered with gaining knowledge and becoming a learned person. But we should still have some information left, right? If we learn them, couldn't we return to civilization quicker? Ren Xiaosu wondered. "It's become lost through the generations," Zhang Jinglin said in regret. "Let me ask you. If I gave you a set of instructions to construct an airplane, would you be able to make one? It's not like I've learned how to do it before. Although having the instructions can save a lot of time, I'll still have to start from scratch," Ren Xiaosu said. "That's right. Everyone is starting from scratch." Zhang Jinglin looked at the remaining half of his cigarette, feeling a little pained. It looked like he was deciding on whether to keep smoking. He had intended to save the remaining half of the cigarette to smoke at a later time. But if he put out the cigarette in front of Ren Xiaosu and Yen Luyuan, wouldn't it be a loss of face for him? Ren Xiaosu was still doubtful. How could no one have overcome the hardships and gotten into research and building up knowledge again in all those years? Those who attempted all died from starvation, Zhang Jinglin said. Could all of that knowledge really have become lost through the generations? Ren Xiaosu could not accept it. Zhang Jinglin looked at Ren Xiaosu seriously this time and said pointedly, they are in the possession of a small number of people. That's enough. Zhang Jinglin stood up and said, don't pursue this matter any further. It's time for class. Ren Xiaosu pestered Zhang Jinglin with a final question. Teacher, when were the walls of the stronghold built? And why did they build them? After the cataclysm, wild animals ran rampant. A very long time ago, there was even a bug infestation. As such, humans were forced to build tall walls to ward off the danger, Zhang Jinglin explained. But even though animals have evolved, they don't actually initiate attacks on humans. Ren Xiaosu was curious about this. Monkeys still remained omnivores, and sparrows still loved eating grains, so it was not like they would actively try to make a meal out of humans. In the ring where humanity was living in at Stronghold 113, the majority of the more ferocious animals had actually been isolated outside of it. The higher the number of a stronghold, the more dangerous a place it was. For example, the legendary Stronghold 178 would often see many casualties each year as they tried to expel beasts from around their area. Meanwhile, Stronghold 113 was considered to be an inland area. There were still many dangers lurking out in the wilderness though, like the wolf pack he had encountered before. However, it wasn't impossible to overcome them. So then why were there still such towering walls built in a huge gathering place of humans like this one? Zhang Jinglin smiled and said, so long as danger still exists on the outside, refugees must depend on the stronghold to make a living. In this way, the stronghold will gain a large force of cheap labor. Do you think that the organizations controlling the strongholds do not have the ability to eliminate those dangers out there? The firearms and explosives that humans possess are more powerful than you can imagine. But why would they want to eliminate them? They don't pose any threat to the organizations at all. Ren Xiaosu fell deep into thought. Although he was mature beyond his years, there were still some things he hadn't experienced. As such, it was expected that he could not understand them. This was also the reason why he was so thirsty for knowledge. Zhang Jinglin continued, they won't topple the walls. Why would groups with a vested interest behind the walls give up a stronghold that gives them a natural class superiority? Zhang Jinglin then went to get a change of clothes. Ren Xiaosu asked, Teacher, why did you change your clothes? Your previous set of clothes were not dirty at all. Zhang Jinglin adjusted his collar and replied, the set I was wearing earlier reeks of cigarette smoke. It is not good for the students if they smell it. Yen Liuyuan's respect for him deepened, but Ren Xiaosu suddenly felt a little unhappy. So it's alright for me to smell it then. It wasn't like you asked me to stand further away from you just now, right? Zhang Jinglin thought for a long while. Get lost. All of a sudden, Ren Xiaosu heard a voice speak again from the palace in his mind, quest. Thirst for knowledge is never a bad thing. But you have to teach other people whatever you've learned. Ren Xiaosu was stunned. He did not fully understand what this quest required him to do. During the afternoon class, the students found it very refreshing when they saw Ren Xiaosu, who was a few years older than them, standing outside the door. It made many of the students turn their heads to look at him. Zhang Jinglin had to knock on the blackboard several times before he could get the students' attention. He said, I'll be teaching about survival for the afternoon class. This was the current era, and the distinctiveness of school came from not only teaching the arts and sciences, but also teaching survival. However, Zhang Jinglin had always felt exasperated when teaching this lesson, because he wasn't experienced with surviving in the wild. Therefore, for most of this lesson, he could only teach it according to what was written in the books that were preserved from the past. Zhang Jinglin looked at the students in the classroom. Pay attention and listen in class. Don't think that danger is very far from you. For now, your parents are still protecting you. But when you grow up, you have to learn how to protect yourselves. For today's lesson, we'll be discussing what you should do if you encounter a pack of wolves. The students in class actually liked listening to the survival lessons the most. The other subjects were still a little boring for their current age group, whereas they found the survival lessons to be the most interesting. The classroom quieted down. Zhang Jinglin looked at Ren Xiaosu, who was standing at the door and listening in on the lesson. You there, tell us what you do when you encounter a pack of wolves in the wild. Ren Xiaosu gave it some thought before replying, I'd try my best to find a slope surrounded by greenery, because that will be the most suitable place for an auspicious burial ground. Zhang Jinglin was surprised. Chapter 7. Substitute Teacher. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Substitute Teacher Translator. Leg Editor. Zhang Jinglin was left speechless by Ren Xiaosu's answer. However, he wasn't aware that Ren Xiaosu was also wondering about this right now. Didn't he teach everyone what he knew? Why was the quest still not complete? Could there be something wrong with the knowledge that he imparted? Teacher. Ren Xiaosu said in a serious tone, you probably haven't seen how huge the wolves in the wild are. Most of the people in town haven't even seen or dealt with them before, but I did. Don't mention a pack of wolves. Even if I were just encountering a lone wolf, the outcome would still be the same. Choose wherever you want to be buried. Initially, Ren Xiaosu thought that Zhang Jinglin would refute him. After all, the way he answered the question would affect the teacher's authority and dignity. However, Zhang Jinglin thought for a long time before saying, you can sit in the classroom for future lessons. You will also be teaching the survival lessons from now on. For the first time ever, the school in the town outside Stronghold 113 gained a substitute teacher. However, Ren Xiaosu did not give any explanation in class about how he survived despite encountering a lone wolf or wolf pack in the wild. Quest complete. Awarded 1.0 strength. By the end of the day, Ren Xiaosu still could not find an opportunity to use the basic skill duplication scroll he had. He went to school because he liked to gain more knowledge, but the knowledge Zhang Jinglin had would not be very useful for his survival for the time being. The first priority Ren Xiaosu had to consider was still survival. Therefore, if he could not use the skill scroll, it would be impossible for him to prove whether everything in his mind was purely made up by his own imagination. However, Ren Xiaosu kept waiting because he felt that there would still be another quest given. Now he had completed yet another quest, and he was rewarded with a 1.0 strength increase. This was a very straightforward figure, and Ren Xiaosu could feel it in his body. He could feel his muscles bulking up slightly underneath his clothes. This was a real supernatural phenomenon as no one could suddenly gain additional muscle strength in a mere tenth of a second. With this, Ren Xiaosu was quite sure that his mind palace was indeed a unique type of skill. This made Ren Xiaosu ecstatic. In fact, he should have been overjoyed about it long ago, but he was afraid that none of it would turn out to be real. A frequent hunter must be highly familiar with their body. They had to know how much they could lift and how fast and hard they could punch or stab with a knife. So Ren Xiaosu immediately evaluated his newfound strength. If the average male adult had a strength rating of 3.0, then Ren Xiaosu used to have a strength rating of 2.5. As he was only 17 years old, it was quite normal for him to be weaker than an adult. He could survive in this town all these years not because of his strength, but because he was ruthless, alert, and calm enough. As his strength surpassed that of the average male adults, this meant that his chance of survival in this wasteland increased by a large amount. After school, Yan Luyuan excitedly said, "Bro, now that you've become the substitute teacher, maybe you'll replace Mr. Zhang as our town's teacher in the future." Ren Xiaosu paused. Indeed, that seems likely. Mr. Zhang also started off as a substitute teacher. It was only after the old teacher passed away that he took over teaching at school. Yeah, everyone in town knows that whoever becomes the substitute teacher will likely take over at the school someday. Think about it. Mr. Zhang allowed you into the classroom to attend the lessons and even made you the substitute teacher. He's definitely thinking of letting you replace him in the future. Yan Luyuan smiled and said, if the people in town learn about it, they will have to treat us with more respect next time. That might not be the case. Ren Xiaosu thought and said, I'm guessing it's only because he hopes to get more cigarettes to smoke. Yan Luyuan stared at Ren Xiaosu. Bro, are you being serious? Actually, it's not a bad idea if I really do become the schoolteacher. Ren Xiaosu said, when I get the position, I'll give it up to you. In that way, you'll end up becoming the schoolteacher instead, right? Ren Xiaosu had really never thought about becoming a schoolteacher, but it was not because he despised the profession. If he had despised it, he wouldn't think of handing the position to Yan Luyuan. Instead, he felt that he was not suitable for this profession at all. If he really had no chance to enter the stronghold at some point in the future, then the wilderness would be the only place left where he could truly belong. Ren Xiaosu was imagining a future where he handed the schoolteacher position to Yan Luyuan as they walked, but he did not notice Yan Luyuan slowing down. Looking at Ren Xiaosu's back, Yan Luyuan experienced an indescribable feeling. This young man's hand was still wrapped in bandages, and even though he had a sharp tongue, he would always leave the best for him. When Ren Xiaosu turned around and realized that Yan Luyuan had fallen quite far behind, he barked, "What are you doing? Hurry up! Coming!" Outside the stronghold, a continuous trail of white smoke was billowing out of the factory chimneys into the sky. As the setting sun shone down onto their backs, it was as though they had nothing in life to worry about. On their way back home, Ren Xiaosu and Yan Luyuan suddenly saw a group of people come out of the stronghold. There were around 14 of them in the group, and half of them were wearing fanciful clothes of all colors, while the other half was made up of people who donned the combat uniform of the private army employed by the overseers of Stronghold 113. It looked like their trip would be accompanied by soldiers, so it was no wonder they dared to head out into a place like the Jing Mountains. These people actually didn't require guides with combat value. They only needed someone who knew the way. However, Ren Xiaosu did not assume the private troops were strong just because they were employed by the overseers of Stronghold 113. In fact, he rarely saw these private troops leaving the stronghold, so it could still lead to serious issues as they might not even have any actual combat experience or seen blood before. Ren Xiaosu saw some of the private troops smoking filtered cigarettes, which were rarely seen in town. A light whiff of cigarette smoke drifted over. Ren Xiaosu could distinctly smell a weird odor. He remembered old Wang mentioning that many of the cigarettes given out by the factories had addictive substances added into them to give people a high. Ren Xiaosu was puzzled why the private troops would smoke something like that when their profession required them to keep a clear mind. He had witnessed people go crazy from smoking these cigarettes, and the private troops only seemed to be smoking the better quality ones. Slowly, a crowd in town gathered. This was because these people had such clean faces that it sharply contrasted the faces of those in town. Bro, is water so abundant in the stronghold that they can wash their faces every day? Yan Luyuan blinked with a shimmer in his eyes. There's no need to envy them. The grease on our faces acts as a protective layer for our skin, Ren Xiaosu consoled without actually trying. But then he noticed a unique presence among that group of people. There was a girl wearing a cap so low he could not tell how old she was. She was dressed in relatively normal clothes that looked loose but fitting. Ren Xiaosu focused on her because it felt like an encounter with a beast in the wild the moment he saw her. Something was fishy about these people, and Ren Xiaosu trusted his intuition. Ren Xiaosu and Yan Luyuan stopped in their tracks, watching from afar. They vaguely knew that this group of people was making inquiries about something with old Wang from the grocery store. They could hear old Wang saying loudly, if y'all are going to the Jing Mountains, you must look for Ren Xiaosu. Without him, you definitely can't pass through. Besides, there are also wolves out there in the wilderness. Might I suggest that you don't take that route? A soldier in the private army sneered, those wolves will be scared off when they hear our gunshots. Why would we need to worry about them? Ren Xiaosu was taken aback. So the wolves were actually afraid of gunshots. This was probably due to the natural instincts of such wild animals. As he had never seen a firearm before, he wasn't sure if the other party was telling the truth. However, some doubt still remained. Another member of the private army asked, who is Ren Xiaosu? We don't care how skillful he is at combat as long as he knows the way. Oh, Ren Xiaosu is well known for being the best hunter in town. He knows most of the routes, so it'll be perfectly fine if you get him to lead the way. Old Wang smiled and said, take my word for it, he's definitely the right choice. But there's something wrong with that kid's head. Having heard all this, Ren Xiaosu turned around and led Yan Luyuan away. Is old Wang's son in your class too? That fat kid. Yan Luyuan gasped at him. Bro, you shouldn't involve his family members. Ren Xiaosu frowned as he had wanted to steer clear of this issue. However, he never expected that old Wang would deliberately recommend himself to this mysterious band. Chapter 8. Something really is wrong with his head. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Something really is wrong with his head. Translator. Leg editor. Leg. As night fell, the people in town gradually returned to their homes. Those living in houses would keep their doors shut while those living in shacks would conceal themselves behind curtain doors. When Ren Xiaosu came back in the evening, he heard that a man working at the rubber factory had been stabbed to death after returning from work. It was said that someone learned about that man's habit of saving money, so someone got evil intentions. The people in town liked living together to look out for each other. Friends, brothers, and couples stayed together and took turns to keep watch throughout the night. In a way, this gave them a better sense of security. This was also how Ren Xiaosu and Yan Luyuan teamed up together at the beginning. But some people fell victim to the people they partnered with. The assailants were often short-sighted as they did not realize that after harming their partners, no one would ever trust them again. The assailants who ended up alone this way would usually come to a bad end. Ren Xiaosu sat in his shack and unwrapped the bandage from his hand. He frowned when he saw the condition of the wound. The flesh around it was red and swollen. This was a sign of inflammation. When he looked up and saw Yan Luyuan walking over, he hurriedly rewrapped the bandage around his hand. Bro, how's your injury? Yan Luyuan asked. It's fine, Ren Xiaosu calmly said. I don't believe you. Let me have a look, Yan Luyuan said as he tried to remove the bandage that Ren Xiaosu had just rewrapped. I said that I'm fine. Ren Xiaosu pushed Yan Luyuan away. If it gets bad, I'll go and buy medicine. Don't lie to me. You tried to endure it the previous time, Yan Luyuan said in agony. Ren Xiaosu sighed. Don't worry. I won't treat my life as a joke. In nature, predators didn't usually go hunting on a whim because they understood one principle. If they got injured even slightly, it could spell death. If even animals could understand this, how could Ren Xiaosu not? Bro, there are 2 potatoes hidden under the chair. Oh, there are even 3 pills here too. Aren't these the anti-inflammatory pills that you wanted to buy today? They look just like the ones we saw at the store. Yan Luyuan was surprised. Did you put them there? No, Ren Xiaosu shook his head as he looked at the 3 pills. These sure are anti-inflammatory pills. Then big sister Xiaoyu must have been the one who put them there. She was the only one I told about your injury. Yan Luyuan grinned as he handed a potato to Ren Xiaosu. Big sister Xiaoyu is so good to you. Why don't you marry her? Ren Xiaosu did a double take. You really change your stance quickly, huh? When she gives us something to eat, you praise her. But when there's nothing, you start bad-mouthing her. Hee hee. Yan Luyuan chomped on the potato noisily. They usually wouldn't get any dinner. Ren Xiaosu said that one had to eat a hearty breakfast and a full lunch, but eating at night was bad for the body. This was a saying passed down from before the cataclysm. Actually, Ren Xiaosu knew the reason for not eating any supper in the present was due to the fact that they were poor. Bro, Ren Xiaosu turned around. He suddenly noticed that Yan Luyuan had his head down and sounded a little sad. He asked, "What's wrong? Do you still remember when you came back here after getting attacked by a wolf pack last year? Someone secretly gave us some medicine that ended up helping you survive the ordeal," Yan Luyuan said. "Of course I remember. I've always been trying to find out who that person was," Ren Xiaosu said. "Big Sister Xiaoyu probably also gave us those pills." Yan Luyuan said, "The hiding spot of the pills is exactly the same." Ren Xiaosu got lost in thought. All of a sudden, Ren Xiaosu heard footsteps coming from outside. There were a lot of people. It was very rare for people to travel on the streets of the town at night. But Ren Xiaosu had already guessed who they were and what their motive was. The reason why the band needed to go via the Jing Mountains this time was just as Ren Xiaosu had predicted. The soldiers of the private army were indeed on another mission. Stronghold 113's overseers had found some information that proved that the Jing Mountains were actually formed after a severe tectonic movement of the Earth's plates, so this could mean that something from before the cataclysm could still be found there. The group had learned about Ren Xiaosu from Old Wang's grocery store. Although they had some hesitations over his mental illness, they asked some other sources as well, and almost everyone felt that Ren Xiaosu was the best candidate to act as their guide. Some of them even wondered what was so great about this Ren Xiaosu that made him so well known in town. Driven by curiosity, they continued making further inquiries. Finally, they got an ambivalent answer. Ren Xiaosu seemed to be the only person around here to have survived an attack by wolves and still make it back to town alive. Last year, when Ren Xiaosu returned to town after a hunting session, he was almost at death's door. His body was bleeding from the wounds that the wolves had inflicted on him with their claws. No matter how vicious the people in town were, they would not do something bad to a dying youth. Everyone looked on with indifference from the sidelines. Even though everyone thought that Ren Xiaosu would surely die that night, he unexpectedly pulled through and even lived well until now. The band members were interested in learning how that youth had managed to survive. Old Wang smiled and said that it was entirely because of Yan Luyuan, who went door to beg for food on his knees. In the end, Ren Xiaosu survived. It even seemed like someone had given him some medicine, but no one knew who it was. Everyone in town knew that Ren Xiaosu had survived through that ordeal, but it also left him with a sickness in the head from that day onwards. By the way, Wang Fugue, a person from the group said to the accompanying Old Wang, "What do you mean by, there's something wrong with his head, It's nothing. I was just saying." Old Wang said with a grin as wrinkles appeared on his face, "It's not a big deal. It's not anything serious. Look, his place is right ahead." Old Wang only dared to tread the streets at night if he was tagging along with these important people who hailed from the stronghold. At this moment, he deliberately spoke in a louder voice as though he purposely wanted to let the townspeople know that he, Old Wang, had a fantastic relationship with these important people of the stronghold. "Xiaosu, hurry out. You have VIPs, Old Wang shouted with a laugh. Suddenly, the shack's curtain door was thrown aside. Ren Xiaosu happily grasped Old Wang's hands and said to him, "Congratulations. Father and child are both fine. The baby weighs 3.24 kilograms. Old Wang was confused, as were the band and the soldiers of the private army. A band member pointed at Ren Xiaosu and looked at Old Wang. "How can you call this alright when he's so mentally ill?" Besides, what the hell did he mean by father and child are both fine? Wasn't it supposed to be mother and child are both fine? That band member said angrily, Wang Fugue, do you know what the consequences of lying to us are? Is this what you call alright? As soon as he finished speaking, the band members turned around and left. They had had some expectations for the legendary Ren Xiaosu, but in the end, they found out that he was just a lunatic. No wonder the people in town said that there was something wrong with Ren Xiaosu's head. There, didn't what they say turn out to be true? Chapter 9. Ask me if there's anything you don't understand. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Ask me if there's anything you don't understand. Translator. Leg editor. Leg Ren Xiaosu stood at the entrance of his shack as he watched the band leave. Old Wang was still at their side apologizing to them, although there's something wrong with Ren Xiaosu's head, this is not what it's like. Please let me explain. The band member did not bother listening to his explanation. Wang Fugue, I'm giving you 6 hours to get me a suitable candidate. Even if there's nothing wrong with this kid, we won't be using him. We'll be setting off at dawn, so don't screw up our plans. Ren Xiaosu stood happily at the shack's entrance and watched the commotion as though he had nothing to do with it. But unexpectedly, the girl wearing the cap turned around and looked at him. Ren Xiaosu suddenly had a feeling that he had been figured out. He could not even see the expression of the girl under her cap, yet he felt his heart throb for some reason. Ren Xiaosu subconsciously activated and used his skill duplication scroll. A voice intoned from the palace, one of the target's skills will be randomly copied. Randomly copied. Randomly copied target's firearms skill. Do you want to learn it? Yes. Seeing the skill duplication scroll disappear, Ren Xiaosu thought that if he did not learn it, it would have gone to waste. Learning successful. You've mastered the advanced firearms proficiency. Wait a minute, didn't I get a basic scroll? How did I master advanced firearms proficiency? Shouldn't I learn a skill at the basic level at most? Ren Xiaosu wondered in his mind. There are only 2 types of skill duplication scrolls. The first type is the basic skill duplication scroll, which you can use to learn any skill advanced and lower. The second type of scroll is the master skill duplication scroll, which you can use to learn a master level skill, provided you've also attained the advanced level of the skill. There is also the chance of copying a target's superpowers, answered the voice from the palace. Ren Xiaosu was stunned to learn that he could also duplicate another's superpowers. He then remembered the girl and asked, can you tell me the level of that girl's firearms skill? Yes, this information can be revealed if it's a target you've learned from. What is the level of her firearms skill proficiency? Master. Perfect. The basic skill duplication scroll allowed the user to learn a random basic or advanced skill of the target. Meanwhile, the master skill duplication scroll allowed for a master.level skill to be learned, provided that particular skill was in the advanced level. There was even a chance of learning the other party's superpower. These levels were entirely judged by the palace itself. Although the palace mentioned something about a success chance, Ren Xiaosu got a little excited at the possibility of learning other people's superpowers. Ren Xiaosu and Yan Luyuan had once discussed whether some superpowers were superior to others. Some people were born fighters while others were born a little weaker. A person like Ren Xiaosu, who needed to survive in the wilderness, would feel that an offensive superpower was more powerful. However, Yan Liuyuan's skill depended on the element of luck, so he couldn't partake in battles. Therefore, Ren Xiaosu was insistent in his belief that there were only different types of superpowers, none was superior to another. But now, a skill that could copy someone else's skills. Just how superior was that? However, Ren Xiaosu was puzzled about that girl wearing a cap. When Ren Xiaosu received the advanced firearms proficiency, a large amount of firearms knowledge was channeled into his mind. It was as though the knowledge had been integrated into him. He gained an instinctive feel for the subject. What he possessed was not only the knowledge of all the different types and models of firearms, their disassembly, maintenance, and usage, but also a near instinctive feel for aiming them. Ren Xiaosu even knew how much recoil each type of gun had. If he was handed a gun right now, as long as it was covered by the advanced firearms knowledge that he had gained, he would be no different from a professional who had trained for years. Regarding accuracy, getting a score of 9.5 and above at a range of 100 meters seemed to be the standard for the advanced firearms proficiency. This surprised Ren Xiaosu a little, but not to the extent of being ecstatic yet. After all, he did not have a gun in his hand. What shocked him even more was that his mind palace had evaluated the girl's firearms skill as perfect. Ren Xiaosu couldn't imagine how amazing the master-level skill was, much less think about what he could do if he perfected the skill. Someone like her was in a band. It seemed that those soldiers of the private army and band members were not aware that such a terror existed in their group. Ren Xiaosu realized earlier that everyone treated her as a normal member of the group. The girl had probably not expected that Ren Xiaosu would use such a mysterious method to gain access to her secret. He made a wise decision to get out of joining this group for their mission. At the same time, Ren Xiaosu derived great pleasure from finding out about someone else's secret. "Bro, why do you keep staring at her back?" Yan Luyuan asked as he stuck his head out of the shack. Ren Xiaosu grinned from ear to ear. He turned around and looked at Yan Luyuan. Just when he was about to behave like an elder brother with authority, the curtain door from next door was lifted. A woman asked, "Who's back?" "Where?" Yan Luyuan and Ren Xiaosu were stunned. The person who came out from the shack next door turned out to be Xiaoyu. Yan Luyuan wondered, "Big sister Xiaoyu, why are you in the shack next door?" Xiaoyu combed her hair and said with a smile, "I moved here and will be your neighbor from now on." "Where's the family of 3 who were living here?" Yan Luyuan asked, "Where have they gone?" "I switched houses with them," Xiaoyu explained. Yan Luyuan pulled Ren Xiaosu aside and whispered, "Bro, big sister Xiaoyu has made a big investment this time. She used to live in a brick house." Ren Xiaosu did not say anything as he lowered his head and went straight back into the shack. Yan Luyuan smiled at Xiaoyu before withdrawing his head back into the shack as well. "Bro, you're still a virgin, right?" Yan Luyuan asked. Ren Xiaosu stared at Yan Luyuan and said, "Luyuan, since you're not young anymore, I wish to educate you about this." Yan Luyuan sat bolt upright and turned serious. "Alright, bro, ask me if there's anything you don't understand." Before Yan Luyuan could finish, he was kicked to the ground by Ren Xiaosu. But Yan Luyuan did not get angry. He just kept laughing. "You've really grown bolder, huh?" Ren Xiaosu laid the bed and said, "Do your best to not provoke big sister Xiaoyu, and don't try to matchmake us. We can't even handle ourselves, so where will we get the time to worry about others?" "Okay," Yan Luyuan replied obediently. "But she gave us some potatoes and medicine, and she's also very concerned about you. Are you really going to ignore her?" Ren Xiaosu thought for a while before saying, "The most important things about being human are to be honest and have a clear conscience. But if we ever feel a pang in our conscience, we must convince ourselves that it isn't so." Yan Luyuan was confused. When Ren Xiaosu started speaking, Yan Luyuan got ready to get lectured by him. But by the time Ren Xiaosu finished, Yan Luyuan couldn't be more dumbfounded. Perhaps this was just how Ren Xiaosu was. In an era like this, a person like Ren Xiaosu would probably survive better than most people. However, Yan Luyuan did not mind at all the kind of person Ren Xiaosu was. Ren Xiaosu's constant fussing and cautiousness was all due to the lessons and experience he gained through the many scars that he received in the past. However, Yan Luyuan knew that Ren Xiaosu still kept some of the things he wanted to say filed away. Chapter 10. Side Quest. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Side Quest Translator. Leg Editor. Leg. At this moment, a rough voice came from outside the shack. It was directed to their new neighbor, Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu, I only found out you moved here when I went over to visit you just now. I brought you cigarettes. Ren Xiaosu and Yen Luyuan looked at each other and frowned. They heard Xiaoyu say, I don't provide that kind of service anymore. Haha. It was as though that person with a rough voice had heard something funny. If you don't do that kind of thing anymore, how are you going to survive? Who will supply you with cigarettes in the future? Let go of me. Xiaoyu sounded angry. The two of them had apparently come to blows. Something ripped. It sounded like someone's clothes had been torn. When Yen Luyuan turned to look at Ren Xiaosu, he saw that Ren Xiaosu was still frowning. Then he said in a whisper, Bro, go and help her. Ren Xiaosu stood up and untied the bone knife from his calf. Raising it aloft, he walked out of the shack. Right at this moment, the keys of the brass typewriter within Ren Xiaosu's mind palace started typing words onto the leather parchment. The voice from the magnificent palace intoned at the same time, Quest. Help, he sneered in his mind and interrupted the voice from the palace. Even without this quest, I'll still help her. From the time that Ren Xiaosu came out of his shack holding the knife, it took just 2 seconds for him to rush up to that man. Ren Xiaosu did not say any threatening words like, let her go, or, touch her again if you dare, because he knew that any unnecessary actions could lead to failure. All he needed to do was to use the simplest solution to solve the simplest problem. When Ren Xiaosu's slim but strong figure came sprinting over like a cheetah, the man promptly drew a knife from his waist and slashed at Ren Xiaosu. Everyone in town would carry a self-defense weapon on their person. The man started to laugh mockingly in his mind because he was almost a head taller than Ren Xiaosu. Further, he was holding an actual metal weapon, not just some bone knife. However, in the next moment, his ridiculing laughter halted. It was common knowledge that a metal weapon would reign over a bone knife even though the wild beasts had gained a skeletal structure as strong as steel. But being as strong as steel did not mean that it was steel. Melee weapons were not banned in town, but it was almost impossible to obtain a good metal weapon. Even though some industries were slowly catching back up to the standards before the cataclysm, they were still limited by a lack of resources at present. Ren Xiaosu appeared before the man in a flash. His sprint had started off with his left leg hitting the ground while the muscles in his right leg tensed up and supported his body weight. Both of his feet now gripped the ground as he concentrated all of his strength there for maximum push-off. Then, like an electric current, he let this strength surge through him from his waist up and into his arms. Ren Xiaosu swung his knife diagonally upwards so hard that he almost slashed a crack right into the darkness of the night, cutting a gully across the land. Clang! The bone knife and the metal weapon collided with each other. The onlookers who were secretly watching were astonished when they saw the two knives break in half at the same time. They had only expected the bone knife to break. In that instant, Ren Xiaosu threw the bone knife aside without hesitation as the man was caught by surprise. This action of throwing the knife away was done in a swift motion after the swing. It was as though Ren Xiaosu had expected it to break. It was obvious he had other plans from the start. He grabbed the man's wrist and punched him hard with his other hand right in his axillary nerve. The man tried to break free from his grasp but suddenly realized that the young man was much stronger than him. How could this be? Wasn't his opponent young? This young man probably only stood as tall as his neck. However, when the man noticed the tough muscles around Ren Xiaosu's neck, he realized that it was pure strength. The axillary nerve ran about 3 centimeters around the upper arm and the armpit, but the punch did not need to land precisely because the size of the fist was enough to cover any deviation. This area is one of the human body's weaknesses. When the axillary nerve receives heavy trauma, neuropathy can occur. Considering the nerve as an electrical cable, such a trauma can cause the axillary nerve to generate an uncontrolled release of electrical signals that can interfere with accurate signal transmission. When the brain gets overloaded by such signals, it will send out a pain signal. The signal overload also causes the limbs to receive a confused jumble of signals. The body then begins to secrete large amounts of calcium and potassium ions in reaction, and the resulting electrical overload is enough to paralyze the entire body for a second. The man let out a scream as he fell to the ground, his limbs twitching uncontrollably. When he finally realized what was going on, he did not have any strength left to take on Ren Xiaosu. Ren Xiaosu stood silently beside him and looked like he was thinking about something. The man panted for a while before begging for mercy. "I won't bear a grudge. Please let me go. I'll forget about today's incident." Any smart person would know that their life was in the hands of Ren Xiaosu. So he shouldn't hoot and holler rudely and unreasonably, but to leave it for later instead. Ren Xiaosu looked at Xiaoyu. "Who is he?" "He's a foreman of the coal mine. He was also the one who led the group that stabbed a person to death in town last night. Since he heard that man had a habit of saving money, he started getting ideas since he had gambling debts." Xiaoyu revealed what the man had told her last night when he boasted about the incident to her. Ren Xiaosu walked over to the road and picked up the man's metal weapon. Then he walked back next to the man. As he stared down at him in contempt, he estimated there to be at most 4 to 5 seconds before the man would regain his mobility. Suddenly, the voice from the palace that had been silent for a while intoned again. "Quest. Set your foe free." But just as the voice from the palace started trailing off, Ren Xiaosu crouched down and jabbed the metal weapon into the man's stomach. The sharp sound of the metal weapon tearing through leather and skin left every onlooker or anyone eavesdropping with a tingling sensation on their scalps. Then the man started bleeding profusely. "You have around 3 minutes. If you can reach the town's clinic in time and get it stitched up, there might still be a chance for you to survive," Ren Xiaosu said calmly. When the man heard that, he stopped caring about the pain. He immediately got up and ran towards the clinic without another word. Quest complete. Awarded Basic Skill Duplication Scroll. Quest complete. Awarded Basic Skill Duplication Scroll. Due to the loss of your weapon, a special side quest has been activated. Ren Xiaosu was stunned even before he finished listening. The first quest should be related to him saving Xiaoyu, so he could understand why it was successfully completed. He did not expect for the second quest to also be considered complete. How the hell does this palace make judgments? Yan Luyuan asked from beside him, "Bro, you're letting him go just like that? What if he recovers after getting stitched up at the clinic and comes back to take revenge on you? He's not a good person at all." Ren Xiaosu stared into the night. As if that shitty clinic in town knows how to stitch someone up. "Bro, seeing how you're still so ruthless, I can rest easy." Because of this, Ren Xiaosu was relieved that the quest was considered complete even though that man was definitely going to die. Moreover, even if he did not die, that rusty metal knife was still a potent weapon for causing tetanus. Even if he could survive the injury, he might as well be dead. Although that man had a metal weapon, he could only afford to get the cheapest type. Ren Xiaosu would probably not have broken the knife otherwise. A person like Ren Xiaosu had a personal set of principles that he would not stray from. Even though he had a superpower now, it would not change his way of doing things. If he had to change, it would due to his own free will. No one else could make him do it. Therefore, it seemed that the criteria for whether a quest was complete was not that strict. What the palace really cared about was the attitude that Ren Xiaosu displayed. At this moment, some people in the shacks along the road started whispering. In fact, over the years, they learned how ruthless Ren Xiaosu was. Nonetheless, they were shocked by today's events. This was because the physiques of the two combatants today were too different. Besides, the strength displayed by Ren Xiaosu was by no means inferior to the foreman's. In fact, he was probably even stronger than the other guy. It was unbelievable. Someone muttered softly in one of the shacks, "See, I said not to provoke him." Ren Xiaosu went to pick up the bone knife that had accompanied him for over a year. Its lifespan had finally come to an end. He turned around and looked at Xiaoyu. In the night, Xiaoyu looked a little delicate. Xiaoyu was, in fact, 8 years older than Ren Xiaosu, but right now, it looked more like she was younger than Ren Xiaosu by 8 years. Ren Xiaosu bluntly asked, "Can you quit smoking?" Xiaoyu nodded vigorously. Those things aren't that addictive since they've only added a tiny amount of poppy pods to it. Old Wang mentioned that the proportion of added substance is very low, so it's still possible to quit if you really want to, Ren Xiaosu said as he walked to the door of Xiaoyu's shack and crouched down. He thrust half of his white bone knife ruthlessly into the mud, leaving only a small portion of it above ground. The onlookers who had some unscrupulous thoughts for Xiaoyu immediately dropped the idea. In the town, this half of the bone knife now symbolized a certain someone's will. No one was willing to make any rash decisions and end up offending the ruthless Ren Xiaosu. Ren Xiaosu turned around and said to Xiaoyu, "But there's something I want to make clear. Although I'm very handsome, it's impossible between us." Xiaoyu looked stunned. "I've only seen you as a little brother." It was Ren Xiaosu's turn to be stunned. "Ha ha ha ha, this is so awkward." Ren Xiaosu immediately led Yan Luyuan back to their shack. He stared at Yan Luyuan as they walked back. "It's all your fault for always babbling nonsense about that to me." Yan Luyuan surreptitiously turned around and winked at Xiaoyu. When Xiaoyu saw Yan Luyuan's face, she started laughing. All her unhappy feelings seemed to vanish into thin air. She squatted on the ground and stared at that half of the bone knife for a long time before heading to sleep with a smile on her face. Meanwhile, Ren Xiaosu closed his eyes and took a detailed observation of the inside of the palace. He also checked out what the typewriter had typed onto the leather parchment. A side quest. How interesting.